with the necessity of training a considerable number of American soldiers for overseas combat. At the time, the U.S. military was under-equipped and understaffed, accustomed to tactics from the 19th century. Suddenly, it needed to absorb tens of thousands of recruits and become expert in modern warfare. In one of those richly suggestive watersheds of history, the old and the new were dramatically juxtaposed. Soldiers on horseback riding next to cars and trucks while airplanes flew overhead. America's military entry into the modern age resulted in a corresponding loss of innocence. And the more I considered the implication, the more determined I became to dramatize the implications of what occurred in Mexico in 1916. I read everything I could about Pershing and his expedition. I went to Columbus, New Mexico, still a small town whose buildings eerily evoke 1916. And in the midst of a dust storm, I walked the route of Villa's attack. I studied countless sepia-tinted photographs of the period. Finally, I felt that I had immersed myself sufficiently to dramatize the feeling of the facts. But I'm not a historian. I'm a novelist. No matter how much research I did, it meant nothing without a story, a very personal, very human narrative that needed to be played out against the powerful historical forces that Pershing and Villa represented. One obvious possibility was to make Pershing and Villa the main characters of the novel. But the notion of stepping beyond history to invent thoughts and emotions for actual persons made me uncomfortable. Instead, I wanted the freedom to imagine. The main characters needed to be entirely my own. But who would they be? Again, my inspiration came from movies. On occasion, a unique film actor has a long enough career that a current role benefits from the accumulation of the other roles that the actor played. Gregory Peck, James Stewart, Cary Grant, these are a few of those whose charisma and longevity caused audiences to associate their present performances with a host of fondly remembered past ones. Another actor whose long career gained from this phenomenon was John Wayne. When he received an Academy Award for his performance in 1969's True Grit, many commentators felt that the honor was not so much for that particular film as for the rest of Wayne's earlier work: Stagecoach, Red River, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and The Searchers, to name a few. In sequence, these films showed him aging. Many were about aging. The young gunfighter of Stagecoach becomes the soon-to-retire cavalry officer of She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, who in turn became the crotchety old marshal of True Grit. The protagonists in Red River and The Searchers were crotchety as well, to put it charitably. One is psychotic, the other a racist, and the memory of them added depth to True Grit's lighter, humorous character. A few years later, Wayne played an aging trail driver in The Cowboys, and that trail driver gained by association with his determined, afraid-to-get-old trail driver in Red River. In his final film, The Shootist, life and fiction vied bitterly, for Wayne played a character who was dying from cancer, as the actor himself would in 1979. That film was released 1 year before Last Reveille was published. I was halfway through the novel by then, and as a consequence, the movie had virtually no influence on me, with one exception. At the start of The Shootist, director Don Siegel inserts film clips from many of Wayne's previous westerns, creating the pretense that Wayne had been the same character in all of them, showing that combined character grow older. The technique dramatized the phenomenon I described previously, and it reinforced a decision that I had made when I started Last Reveille in 1975. The decision has to do with perspective. I referred to the 1916 events in Mexico as a historical watershed. After Pershing modernized the U.S. military, for example, he led his soldiers to Europe and World War I. George S. Patton, Jr., a lieutenant who gained battle experience with Pershing in Mexico, went on to become one of America's most important commanders in World War II. In those cases, the movement of events